My wife humiliated me at the country club, until the club president called me, sir. Welcome back everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The dining room at Pine Ridge Country Club had the specific, amber quality of a space that had been designed to communicate permanence. The dark mahogany paneling, the brass fixtures that caught afternoon light at angles that made everything look like it had been there for a century and intended to remain for another, the particular silence of a room whose carpet had absorbed 30 years of conversations that the people having them considered important. Marcus Thompson had always liked it for precisely that reason. He was sitting at the table Elena had chosen. Center of the room, visible from all angles, the table that announced itself, and he was looking at the bread basket he hadn't touched and thinking about the quarterly foundation review he had scheduled for Monday morning, which was a more interesting thing to think about than the conversation currently happening around him. Elena's friends occupied the other seats. Justine and her husband Richard, Camille and her partner Devon, and Patricia Weston, who had no partner at the moment but had the social confidence of a woman who didn't require one. They were the Pine Ridge crowd. Or rather, they were the crowd that came to Pine Ridge because it was the kind of place that communicated to the people you wanted to impress that you were the kind of person who came to places like this. The distinction mattered, though Marcus had learned that pointing it out in social settings produced results he preferred to avoid. He'd been managing results he preferred to avoid for most of the marriage. The Hendersons got in, Justine was saying, about the couple who had been on the membership waiting list for 2 years. Finally, I heard the board moved them up because of the Hendersons' donation to the renovation fund. Smart, Camille said. That's how it works. Money talks louder than pedigree at these places now. Not here, Patricia said. Pine Ridge still has standards. She looked around the table with the proprietary satisfaction of a woman who considered her presence at a place as evidence of the place's good judgment. Not everyone gets in. Thank God. Marcus almost didn't, Elena said. The table didn't go completely quiet. It adjusted, the way a room adjusts when a weight shifts inside it. Elena, Marcus said, quietly. I'm just saying, she said, and the just saying was the specific performance of casualness that made what followed not casual at all. When we applied, the board had questions. About his background, his professional situation. It took some managing. She looked around the table with the expression of a woman sharing a confidence that cast her in a favorable light. I had to make some calls. This was not true. This was so comprehensively not true that Marcus experienced the specific, compound sensation of a person hearing a false thing stated so confidently in public that the falseness had no space to breathe. He looked at his bread basket. He looked at the brass fixtures. He breathed. Some people, Elena continued, warming to the audience the way she always warmed to an audience, just aren't built for places like this. It's not an insult. It's just reality. You have to have the right presence, I suppose. The right way of moving in these spaces. She glanced at Marcus with the specific, practiced affection of a woman whose affection was performing something else entirely. Marcus has always been more comfortable in different environments. What does that mean? Devon said. Devon, who had the occasional, uncomfortable habit of asking the question that clarified things when clarification was the last thing Elena wanted. It means, Elena said, that some people are naturally suited to certain social registers and some aren't. Marcus is brilliant in his way. He's wonderful at numbers, at his office work, all of that. But the social dimension of a place like Pine Ridge, she let the sentence end with the specific incompletion of a sentence that's confident its meaning has landed. Marcus set down the role he'd finally picked up. He looked at Elena. He looked at the 5 people around the table who were managing the conversation's awkwardness with varying degrees of skill. He looked at the room, at the mahogany paneling and the brass fixtures and the carpet that had absorbed 30 years of conversations the people having them considered important, and he thought about the thing he knew about this room that Elena had apparently decided was not information she needed to have. Excuse me, he said, to no one in particular. He stood. He walked toward the dining room's entrance, where a young staff member named Devon, a different Devon, the one who worked Tuesday through Saturday and had been at the club for 3 years and greeted Marcus by name without requiring any reminder, was stationed near the host stand. Could you let Thomas know I'm here? Marcus said, when he has a moment. Of course, Mr. Thompson, Devon said. I'll let him know right away. Marcus walked back to the table. He sat down. He ate his roll. He waited. The membership at Pine Ridge Country Club had a documented history that went back to its founding in 1962, when a group of Atlanta businessmen had purchased the property and established the institution with the specific, exclusive intent of creating a space that was theirs in the most durable sense of the word. The membership list had evolved over the decades, had expanded, contracted, updated its composition in response to both market forces and the particular social negotiations that private clubs conducted with the changing world around them, but the core structure had remained consistent. A board of directors, a membership committee, and at the top of the governance structure, a president who served 3-year terms. Thomas Beaumont had been president for 5 years, which was longer than the term structure normally allowed and which reflected the board's consistent reluctance to ask him to step aside, because Thomas Beaumont was the kind of president whose tenure coincided with the club's best years and nobody wanted to test the connection. Thomas Beaumont also happened to be one of Marcus Thompson's closest professional contacts, a friendship that had developed over 8 years through shared board service on a hospital foundation and deepened through the specific, mutual respect of two people who had found, against the statistical odds of any two people finding this, that they thought about most important things in similar ways. Marcus had not mentioned his relationship with Thomas to Elena. He had not mentioned it for the same reason he had not mentioned many things to Elena, because he had been watching something, and the watching required specific conditions, and one of those conditions was that Elena's understanding of his place in the world remain exactly as limited as her curiosity about it had allowed it to be. Thomas knew about Elena, in the way that Thomas knew about most things in Marcus's life, through the patient accumulation of information over 8 years of friendship, through the specific, attentive regard of a man who listened more than he spoke and therefore heard more than most. Marcus had told Thomas, 2 months ago, that things were ending. Thomas had said, "Tell me when you need me." Marcus had thought, at the time, that this was the generous offer of a friend who expected it would never be called on. He was about to call on it. The flashback to how Pine Ridge began was, like most things in Marcus's life, a story of patient investment rather than sudden arrival. He'd been aware of the club for years before he had any personal connection to it, had driven past the entrance gates on Pine Ridge Road and registered it with the mild, neutral attention he gave to institutions that existed in a register he wasn't yet operating in. He'd first entered as a guest, 7 years ago, at the invitation of Thomas Beaumont, who had suggested the club's dining room for a working lunch that had extended into 3 hours of conversation about a hospital foundation project that both of them cared about. He'd liked it, not for the status it represented, which he found less interesting than the people who valued it seemed to, but for the specific, material qualities of the place, the kitchen, which was genuinely excellent, the grounds, which were maintained with the care of people who understood that beauty required sustained attention, and the library off the main corridor, which had the particular, serious quality of a room that had been used for actual reading. He'd applied for membership a year later, through the standard process, without Thomas's assistance, because he wanted the membership to reflect his own standing rather than his connections. The committee had reviewed his application with the thorough attention they gave all applications, and he'd been admitted on the basis of his financial profile and professional standing, which was substantial enough to require no supplementary assistance from anyone. Elena had joined him on the membership a year into their marriage, as a spousal member, the standard arrangement. She had, over the subsequent 3 years, developed the specific relationship with Pine Ridge that people develop when they mistake access for ownership, treating the club with the proprietary energy of someone who had built it rather than someone who had been admitted to it, accumulating the social architecture of a regular member whose presence communicated permanence. She had told her friends, on multiple occasions that Marcus was aware of, that she had gotten them both in. That her connections had smoothed the application. That Marcus would never have managed it on his own. The story existed in her social circle as a fixed piece of furniture. One of the things people knew about Elena, part of the account she gave of her marriage, a detail that cast her as the capable one, the socially sophisticated one, the one who understood how these spaces worked and knew how to navigate them for the benefit of both of them. Marcus had never corrected this story. He'd been watching it, and he'd understood that the story was more useful to him unchanged than corrected. Now, at the table in the dining room while Elena explained to her friends that some people simply weren't suited for certain social registers, the story had completed its usefulness. Thomas Beaumont entered the dining room at 3:17 in the afternoon, which was 4 minutes after Marcus had sent word that he was there, which was efficient even by Thomas's standards and which reflected, Marcus understood, the specific attentiveness of a friend who had been told 2 months ago that things were ending and who had been paying attention to the calendar. Thomas was 61, with the composed, unhurried bearing of a man who had spent 40 years in rooms that expected authority from him and had delivered it consistently enough to make the expectation feel natural rather than imposed. He moved through the dining room with the ease of a person entirely at home in the space, which was accurate in his case in a way that was accurate for very few of the people who used the word home in relation to Pine Ridge. He saw Marcus at the center table. He walked directly to him. "Marcus," he said, and the warmth in the word was the specific warmth of a genuine friendship expressed in a professional register, real, not performed, but understood to be occurring in a context where professionalism was the frame. "I'm so glad you're here. I've been meaning to reach out about the library renovation. There are a few things I'd love your input on." "Thomas," Marcus said, standing to shake his hand. "I was hoping I'd catch you." Thomas's eyes moved, briefly and without drama, across the table, across Elena, whose expression had arrived at a particular configuration that Marcus recognized as the early stages of significant recalibration, and across Justine and Richard and Camille and Devon and Patricia, who were engaged in the specific, focused attention of people watching a scene they haven't scripted. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Thomas said. "Not at all," Marcus said. "Thomas, you know Elena." "Of course," Thomas said, to Elena, with the warm, impersonal courtesy of a man greeting a spousal member. "Elena, it's good to see you." "Thomas," Elena said, and something in the way she said his name had acquired a new texture. The texture of someone recalibrating in real time, adjusting to the specific quality of Thomas's attention to Marcus, which was not the quality of a club president greeting a member but the quality of a man greeting a peer. "Marcus," Thomas said, returning his attention fully, "when you have a moment, there's something I'd love to discuss about the endowment committee. Your perspective on the investment strategy has been exactly what we needed this year, and I want to make sure we're aligned before the Q4 meeting." "I'll come by the office after lunch," Marcus said. "Perfect," Thomas said. And then, and this was the moment, this was the specific, quiet, devastating moment that the whole afternoon had been building toward, Thomas looked at Marcus with the full, genuine regard of a man addressing someone whose standing he understood completely, and he said, "Thank you for everything you've done for this club, sir. The members may not all know it yet, but this place is what it is in no small part because of you." The word was not performative. It was not the sir of a service professional addressing a guest. It was the sir of a peer acknowledging something that deserved acknowledgement. The specific respect one leader extends to another in a space they both understand. Thomas touched Marcus's shoulder briefly, the brief, genuine contact of a friend, and excused himself from the table with the unhurried efficiency of a man who had done what he came to do. The dining room continued around them. Marcus sat down. He picked up his glass of water. He looked at Elena. Elena was looking at the space where Thomas Beaumont had been standing, with the specific expression of a woman whose entire working model of a situation has been replaced, in the span of 3 minutes, by a different model that she does not yet have sufficient information to understand but whose outlines are becoming clear enough to be uncomfortable. "What was that?" Justine said. "Thomas and I are on the endowment committee together," Marcus said, pleasantly. "We've been working on the investment strategy for the renovation fund." "You're on the endowment committee," Camille said. "Have been for 4 years," Marcus said. "The endowment committee," Patricia said, and her voice had the specific quality of someone repeating a phrase because the phrase requires confirmation before it can be processed. "The Pine Ridge Endowment Committee." "Yes," Marcus said. He looked at Elena. "Elena," he said, gently, "I'd like to correct something for the table. I wasn't admitted to Pine Ridge because of your calls. I applied through the standard process, and the committee reviewed my application based on my professional standing and financial profile. The review took 6 weeks and was entirely routine." He said it without heat, without the sharpness of accusation, in the same measured, informational register he used for everything that required honesty rather than drama. "You didn't make any calls. I never asked you to. And whatever you told our friends about how we got in, I want you to have accurate information, and I want them to have it too." The table received this in the specific, collective quiet of people who have understood that a truth has just been laid next to a story that had been living in its place, and that the story and the truth cannot coexist. "The endowment committee," Elena said, finally. Her voice was the stripped one, the genuine one, the one Marcus had heard only occasionally in 4 years of marriage and that always arrived when the architecture of her management had been removed. You've been on the endowment committee for 4 years. Yes, Marcus said. And Thomas and I have been friends for 8 years, Marcus said. We met on a hospital foundation board. He asked me to join the endowment committee here in my 2nd year of membership. Elena looked at the table, at her hands, at the bread basket, at the mahogany paneling and the brass fixtures and the particular, amber light of a room she had moved through for 3 years believing she understood whose room it was. Marcus, she said. I know, he said. It's a lot of information to receive at once. He looked at the friends, at Justine, who had the expression of someone doing careful, backward-looking arithmetic, and at Camille, who was looking at Elena with the specific, uncomfortable sympathy of someone who now understood that the story they'd been told for 3 years had been, at minimum, incomplete. At Patricia, who had the expression of someone whose assessment of the relative social standings at this table had just been fundamentally revised. I'd like to say one more thing, Marcus said, to the table, to the dining room, to the afternoon that had been building toward this since Elena had said that some people simply weren't suited for certain social registers. Not as a complaint, and not to embarrass anyone. What I'd like to say is this: when someone tells you who a person is, before asking that person who they are, you're getting one person's description of another person, which is always limited by what the describer has chosen to know. He looked at Elena with the honest, direct attention he'd always given her at her best and her worst. I've been here, Elena, in this room, on this committee, in Thomas's office discussing the renovation fund, for years. You just never asked. He stood. He picked up his jacket. I'm going to go speak with Thomas, he said. Please enjoy your lunch. He walked across the dining room. At the entrance, Devon, the staff member, the one who worked Tuesday through Saturday, held the door with the quiet professionalism that was the club's standard. Mr. Thompson, Devon said. Thank you, Devon, Marcus said. He went through the door. He called Vivian from the corridor outside Thomas's office. File Monday, he said, when she answered. I've been ready since March, Vivian said. What happened today? She told 5 people I got us into Pine Ridge through her connections, Marcus said. That I wasn't suited for the social register. That some people simply aren't built for places like this. A brief silence. In the club dining room. In the club dining room. While you were on the endowment committee, Vivian said. While I was on the endowment committee. Vivian made a sound that was not quite a laugh and was not professional and that Marcus found, in that particular moment, one of the more genuinely satisfying things he'd heard all afternoon. Monday, she said. Monday, he confirmed. Thomas was at his desk when Marcus came in, with the composed, attentive expression of a man who had been in the dining room 8 minutes ago and understood that the 8 minutes since had contained something. How bad was it? Thomas said. Contained, Marcus said. But complete. Thomas nodded. Are you? I'm good, Marcus said. I've been good for a while. Today just made the timing obvious. The endowment review, Thomas said, and the shift back to business was its own kind of friendship. The recognition that Marcus was not in this office to process the dining room but to continue the work that was the real organizing principle of his presence here. I wanted to talk about the allocation model for the renovation fund. The committee's current proposal is too conservative given the timeline. I agree, Marcus said. I've been looking at a different allocation structure. I brought the analysis. He sat down. He opened his portfolio. They worked for 90 minutes, as they usually worked, directly, efficiently, with the specific pleasure of 2 people who are good at something and are doing it together. The divorce proceedings were handled by Vivian with the organized, thorough efficiency that had made her worth every dollar Marcus had ever paid her. Elena's attorney, a man named Forsyth who came to the table with the professional realism of someone who had reviewed the full scope of the situation and communicated its parameters to his client with appropriate directness, engaged within 48 hours of the Monday filing. The settlement was fair. Marcus had instructed Vivian to be fair, because fairness was his standard regardless of circumstances, and because the goal was completion rather than victory. The completion arrived 6 weeks later, in documents that Vivian signed off on with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had done her job exactly right. Elena called him twice during the proceedings. Once in the first week, to say something that moved between apology and negotiation with the specific rhythm of someone who had not yet decided which mode she was in, and once in the third week, to say something that was more purely apology, stripped of the negotiation, the genuine register he'd always recognized when it arrived. He received both calls. He acknowledged the apology on the second one, because genuine things deserved acknowledgement. He did not reconsider. The consideration had been done over months of watching and preparation and the specific, honest accounting of a man who knew what was true about his marriage and had decided what to do with the truth. Thomas, at the club's November board meeting, mentioned the endowment committee's quarterly results with the specific satisfaction of a president describing outcomes he was proud of. Marcus had been instrumental in the investment strategy that produced those results. This was noted in the meeting minutes, which were circulated to the full board and the membership committee. Several members, in the weeks that followed, introduced themselves to Marcus at the club with the specific, recalibrating warmth of people who had recently learned something they were adjusting to. He received these introductions with the same unhurried, pleasant ease with which he received all introductions: interested, attentive, entirely unperforming. The Thompson Foundation for Disrespected Men incorporated in January, 3 months after the dining room and 6 weeks after the decree was finalized. Marcus taught the first session himself, not to a large cohort, not with the infrastructure of an established organization, but to 11 men in a borrowed conference room on a Saturday morning, because 11 was the number who had responded to the announcement and Saturday was when they were available and a borrowed conference room was what was there. He told them the dining room story. All of it, the bread basket, the brass fixtures, the sentence about some people simply not being suited for certain social registers, and Thomas walking through the door 4 minutes after Marcus sent word he was there. He told them, the most dangerous assumption someone can make about you is not that you're less than you are, it's that you don't know you're less than they think you are. The assumption of your ignorance is what makes their performance possible. He told them, the response is not to correct the performance in the moment, though the moment may come. The response is to know yourself so completely, to document your standing so thoroughly, to build your relationships and your reputation with such consistent integrity, that when the moment comes it arrives not as argument but as revelation. He told them, Thomas Beaumont called me sir in front of 5 people who had just been told I wasn't suited for the room they were sitting in. That word didn't give me my standing. It confirmed what already existed. The difference between those two things is the entire lesson. He told them, your dignity is not stored in other people's recognition of it. It's stored in the accuracy of your own understanding of who you are. Other people's recognition is whether, sometimes favorable, sometimes not, always temporary. Your knowledge of yourself is the house. Build the house. He told them, find Thomas Beaumont. Find the people who know who you are because they've been paying attention for years, not because they've just been shown a magazine article or a bank balance or a club president calling you sir. Find the people who knew before the reveal, because those are the people who are actually responding to you. 11 men in a borrowed conference room on a Saturday morning listened with the complete, inward-turning attention of people receiving something they'd needed for a long time. On a Tuesday in March, Marcus Thompson walked into the Pine Ridge Country Club library, the one off the main corridor, with the particular, serious quality of a room that had been used for actual reading, and settled into the chair by the window with the quarterly foundation report that needed his attention. The library was empty, which was one of its reliable qualities, and the afternoon light came through the windows at the specific, amber angle that the dining room also had, the light that made everything look like it had been there for a century. He thought about the first time he'd come into this library. 6 years ago, his first full year as a member, he'd wandered in during a rain delay on the golf course and found the collected financial history of the club in a set of bound volumes on the third shelf, which he'd spent 2 hours reading with the absorbed, genuine interest of someone encountering primary documents about something they care about. He'd cared about Pine Ridge, from the beginning, in a way that was not about what it communicated to other people but about what it was in itself, the grounds and the kitchen and the library and the specific, serious quality of an institution that had been maintained carefully by people who believed in its continuity. He'd served on its endowment committee for 4 years because Thomas had asked him and because the work was interesting and because Marcus Thompson served on committees whose work was interesting when the opportunity arose. None of this had been for Elena's eventual confrontation with it. The confrontation had been a side effect, not a design, the byproduct of a man who built things in his actual life rather than in the performance of his life, and who had married someone who had confused the performance for the actuality and had never thought to check the distinction. His phone showed a message from Vivian, Foundation's first external grant application received. A men's financial literacy nonprofit in Memphis. Strong proposal. He typed back, schedule a review for next week. I want to read the full application. He put the phone down. He picked up the quarterly report. The afternoon light worked on the library windows. The room maintained its serious, reliable quiet. Marcus Thompson read, and thought, and worked, in the room that had always been his, in the institution that had always received him with the respect he'd always deserved, in the life that was now, completely and without qualification, organized around exactly who he was. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If it moved you, like, share, and comment on the lessons you took from it. Let me know where you're watching from, and I'll see you in the next video.